Good evening, everyone. It's your boy Neverfade back with another guide. This time we're going to be touching base on Shadow Priest. In this guide, we're going to go over things like what exactly the spec does, what it's good at doing, a little bit more in depth about the spec, your burst cooldowns as well as your sustained rotation. It may not be fully optimized. This is just a quick glance. I obviously haven't done much PvE this season yet, as the season came out Tuesday last week. But this should be pretty cookie cutter for most things. It should be fine running into like early Mythic Plus. Obviously, there's going to be ways to optimize it a little bit better, but this guide should go over the rotation and the basics to be able to go in and do, I would say, top 80% damage, which is going to be more than acceptable for most people. So, without anything further, let's go ahead and jump into it and start discussing. So the first thing we're going to want to look at in general is going to be our specialization tree here. At first glance, this can be a little bit overwhelming, but from what I've noticed and what I've looked through, most of the stuff is just passive modifiers. As with most talent trees, it is just going to be all of your passive damage built into your spells. Shadow Priest is actually one of the more straightforward classes to be able to do damage on. You have a priority rotation that does matter, but for the most part, you don't have a lot of spells, it's not super complicated, and it actually puts out pretty high damage. So, first thing we want to look at specifically, we're running Archon. You can go Void Weaver, but I went ahead and pulled up what the top Shadow Priests are running right now on Mythic Plus. To do that, I go to a website called Raider.io, and you can filter it by Mythic Plus, and if you scroll through, you can look at each of the classes and the specs, and you can find some of the top players of the spec that you want to be running, and typically what I'll do is I'll just pull their spec. They've done the research, they've theory crafted the build. I don't want to do that. I've found that it's easier to just use other people's work than to do it myself because I'm a lazy person, and honestly, they're running at a level that I won't ever touch. I am obviously not a top 10 Mythic Raider. I don't want to be, so I will let them do the work, and yeah, I'll just copy what they do. It's a much easier approach to it. So, we run Archon. Archon is centered around using the ability called Halo. As you can see here, pretty much everything in this tree is based around using Halo. So that's going to be our main DPS cooldown. You can see it as a 1 minute cooldown. This is going to enable pretty much all of our damage here. There's some other passives in this tree, but for the most part, it's just passive damage and Halo giving us a ton of different benefits. For example, every time Halo deals damage, we gain a proc of Surge of Insanity, and Halo does damage, I think it's like 4 or 5 times throughout this whole tree, so you're getting a lot of these procs, as well as when you're using Devouring Plague, you're getting these procs, which are going to give you enhanced Mind Flays. They're just going to be super fast, high damage Mind Flays. This is how we're going to be doing a lot of our single target damage. Obviously, we don't really run Mind Spike, you can see here, so the other part of this buff for Surge of Insanity doesn't really apply to us. So we're going to focus more on the Mind Flay part, but yeah, for the most part, that's going to be our main cooldown to put out our huge damage. We have another couple other burst cooldowns, like Shadow Fiend, we have Power Infusion, and we have Void Eruption. We are going to want to pair these when we're doing our burst with Halo to maximize the absolute amount of damage that we can get out. Obviously, it depends on the fight. There are some fights that have phases and where you won't be able to just pummel damage into things, so you want to be conscious about when you're using these cooldowns, but these are going to be your main burst cooldowns. So, with that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual burst rotation. I'll break it down for you here, and we can take a look at the sustain afterwards. So, if we're looking at our burst rotation, the very first thing that we want to do is we want to put our dots up. We have Vampiric Touch, and we have Shadow Word Pain. In your talent tree, there's a talent that makes it so that your Shadow Word Pain is automatically applied when you use Vampiric Touch. You can see here, I cast the dot, we have both of them on it. So I don't even have Shadow Word Pain on my action bars. You can put it on there if you want to, but typically you'll never be casting one without the other, so I would just make sure that you're putting Vampiric Touch on. The most optimal way to do this in an AoE situation is via Shadow Crash. We have a talent that allows us to hit with Shadow Crash, and it will apply our damage over time effects to everything that's within that radius. So you can see here, it's got a pretty big radius. You cast it, it hits, dots on everything. So this is the most optimal way to put your dots on multiple targets. From there, we'll want to go ahead and start our burst cooldown. So we'll go ahead and pop out our Shadow Fiend, put up our Power Infusion, and then we'll want to hit our Void Eruption, and then Halo. While Void Eruption's up, you want to press Void Bolt every time. Obviously, you want to spend your Surge of Insanity procs whenever you get them. Instant cast Mind Blasts, and just cycling through that, spend your Insanity on Devouring Plagues. They stack, so you don't need to worry about moving it to different targets. Just trying to keep hitting Void Bolts. Whenever something lights up, you want to press it. It seems really straightforward. If it lights up, press it. It's going to do really big damage. It's usually lighting up because it has some kind of a modifier on it. So you want to be pressing that button and just kind of maintaining your dots and cycling through everything that you can, using your procs as you get them in accordance. For priority system, always prioritize your Surge of Insanities. They stack up to 3 times, but you don't want to let any of those fall. So if you have multiple things lit up simultaneously, prioritize that Mind Flay. The other ones tend to last a little bit longer anyway. Then the next prio would probably be Shadow or Death. This hits really hard, and it makes it so that it doesn't really do any damage back to you. And then Mind Blast procs are just going to make them instant as well. Not a huge priority. Typically, you're only Mind Blasting to build your Insanity so that you can dump Devouring Plagues into them to get more Surges of Insanity and just keep everything rolling. But that's pretty much how this spec plays. It's very high APM. It's a lot of watching for procs and utilizing those procs and maintaining dot uptime. Your dots are going to do damage. They cause the shadowy apparitions to come out, which also deal damage. Everything you do is causing eruptions, which is doing more AoE damage. You can see here I haven't even cast an ability. This is just from the dots. So definitely want to prioritize keeping dots up, and then just that priority system for your actual burst cooldowns. And during your burst windows with everything running, you're going to be getting these procs like crazy. It's going to seem like a lot, but it slows down a lot more during the sustain, and then it becomes more of an actual priority system. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we've gone ahead, we've done our burst. Now let's look at sustain. Let's go ahead and say that all of this stuff is on cooldown. We have Halo and Shadow Crash up, right? So we're in an AoE situation like we would be in Mythic Plus. You want to maintain your dots. Obviously, if something's lit up, you want to utilize that. And then you want to use Mind Blast on cooldown to generate Insanity, and anytime you can, you want to put Devouring Plagues out. You can use Void Torrent on anything that's going to live through its cast typically. That's the best way to use it. You want to get the actual damage worth. Make sure you're spending those Devouring Plagues. After you cast 2, you get the Surge of Insanity. You want to hit that. Keep dots up. Obviously Halo on cooldown to get more procs. You get the Insanity there. Send your Mind Blast. When you can't do anything else, you have no procs, nothing else is up, and you have no Mind Blast, just Mind Flay. Typically you won't ever really hard cast it though, you'll just be cycling through the rest of your cooldowns. But as you can see, it's just a priority system. Spend Insanity on Devouring Plague, spend procs of Insanity Surge, spend Shadow or Death procs, spend Mind Blast procs. It's very straightforward. It gets a little bit more in depth when you have to start maintaining your dot uptime, but for the most part, it is a very, very standard rotation. It doesn't deviate much, so you should be able to utilize this going into any content and be totally fine. Obviously, in single target, you can forego Shadow Crash if you want to. It still hits for a little bit of damage, so it's probably still worth using to apply your dots initially. But if it's on cooldown and your dots are going to go down for whatever reason, just hard cast a Vamp Touch. It's not going to be the end of the world. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to Shadow Priest. It's not too difficult. Obviously, you have some utility. You have Vampiric Embrace, which is just going to make all of the damage you do heal your team a little bit more. So in times of emergency, you can use that. You have shields that you can put out on yourself and teammates if you need to. Typically, I wouldn't bother. It's not even really worth casting. You can see it's 350,000 shield. I have 6 million health. It's one attack, so it's not really a big deal. Flash healing's not a bad idea if your healer's low on mana or you just need to help heal some. It actually heals for quite a bit, even as Shadow. It'll just chew through your mana. Luckily, none of our abilities really cost any significant amount of mana, so you're not going to kill yourself doing that. You're just going to lose DPS. Desperate Prayer, use it as a heal if you're low. Click it. It'll heal you a bunch. It actually just increases your maximum health, and then you retain that health when it's gone, so super useful. Silence, things like that. But for the most part, for your damage rotation, it should be incredibly straightforward, and it's just a priority system of maintaining those dots and stuff. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and as always, thanks for watching.